All right, I'm going to tell you the story of how I got myself put in prison. First of all, I confessed. I did have sexual interaction, sexual contact with a very young woman. I'm doing this inside because the weather outside has been crazy for days. The wind has been blowing nonstop. So I'm inside the camper, set up a little makeshift studio. We'll see how it goes. The very first time that there was contact, sexual contact between me and this very young woman, it was a beautiful summer day. We had decided to walk to the park just a few blocks away to go play soccer. She's a very good soccer player, tomboy. We were walking, and I was just walking by myself, and she came up from behind me and dipped her head in between my shoulder here. And as she did that, she grabbed my hand, and so my arm was resting on her shoulder, and she was right here, and she was holding my hand, and she she pressed my hand into her breast, and I was like, I tensed up, and I looked over at her and I said, "What are you doing? Doesn't that make you feel uncomfortable?" And she looked up at me and she said, "No, I like it." At that moment, so many things just exploded inside of me. So much confusion and just so much confusion. That was the beginning of physical contact between she and I. It didn't happen a lot. I didn't go too crazy. I never had sex with her. There was no intercourse. Now I'm gonna go back and kind of lead up to that moment where the first time that there was physical contact between she and I. By that time, we had been pretty comfortable. We had been living in the same house. I was dating her mom, and we had been dating for a couple of years, and so I was very comfortable with this young woman. She's a tomboy. She loved to scrap and wrestle and just be, rough and rowdy. She's a really good soccer player, so she's just a tough girl. Playing soccer, one of her favorite things to do was try and sneak up behind you and, kick your legs out from underneath you to see if she could make me fall, hit the ground. I mean, she was kind of an aggressive girl. Over the course of the time that I, got to know her, I grew very fond of her. I bonded with her. I did care about her very, very much. I loved her. In a previous relationship with a different woman, a woman named Mary, I'll tell you about my relationship with Mary towards the end here. But in my relationship with Mary, she has a son named Zach, and I lived with Mary for a number of years, and her son came of age, became puberty age while she and I were dating. He was going through fifth grade or whatever it was, sex ed, and I remember the day he came home from school kind of asking questions a little bit, and at that point I was young. I was in my early 20s. Mary was considerably older than me at that point. She was in her late 30s. When he came home kind of talking about sex ed stuff, I was not totally sure how to deal with that, how to handle that, but I could remember back to when I was a teenager, and I was definitely the subject of purity culture. The idea that, you just got to stuff everything that you're feeling and do not allow yourself to feel or be sexual in any way, shape, or form. And I knew that that wasn't right. I knew that that was screwed up. So my approach with Zach was, I told him, I believe as a human being, you have the right to know what the future holds for you. You have a right to knowledge and understanding in order to be prepared for relationship, because I wasn't prepared for relationship. The culture around me told me the best way to prepare for a relationship in the future is don't do it. Don't prepare for it at all. Just stuff it. That's the best thing for you. So my approach with Zach was very simple. I told him, I believe you as a human being have a right to understand the world that you live in, how it works, and to be prepared for future relationships. So I told him, I said, if there's anything you want to know, any question you ever want to ask, I will always give you the most upfront and honest answer that I possibly can. That proved to be a very good strategy with him. I remember sitting out in the backyard, chucking the football back and forth, and he just kind of asking questions. And mostly what I told him, my advice to him was, I remember specifically, don't be in a hurry to get married. Most likely the first woman that you date not be will not be the woman that you marry. There's a lot of people out there in the planet, and there's a whole bunch of different people that could make potential good partners. And so don't be in a hurry. Your body wants to do sex. Your body is going to want to. And I said, I'm not going to tell you that you can't or that you shouldn't. But here is what I know. There are a few things that can happen. There are 3 potential negative consequences for engaging in sexual activity. Those 3 potential consequences, this is a matter of, science. Those 3 potential consequences are either STDs. You can contract an STD, which is totally manageable. You could get somebody pregnant, which again is totally manageable. Or the third thing is big emotions, like emotional wounds, emotional trauma, or big positive emotions too. And that also can be managed if you learn how to manage it and are careful. I told him, don't get an STD, be careful. Don't get anybody pregnant. That is number one most important thing. So many people get pregnant at an early age and then just get trapped and locked into it. If you are going to have babies, make sure that you are in a good position, that you're mature, and that your financial situation is prepared to be able to support that young life. So be careful with pregnancy. Be super careful. And then also be very careful with your emotions. Don't just throw your sexuality around. You're talking about heavy attachments and heavy feelings with people that you care about, and you don't want to hurt others, and you don't want to be hurt. That was my advice to Zach, and that worked really well. Fast forward years later, I got in this relationship with this woman with a young daughter, and same thing happened. She's 12 years old. She came home from school talking about sex ed, and I said, no problem. I've done this before, been here before, had a positive experience, and I'm just going to stick to that same strategy. I told her the exact same things. I said, I believe you have a right to know the truth, and if there's anything you want to know, I'll just be as open and honest with you as I can. I wasn't prepared for where that was going to take the situation. I was blindsided by this. That day that she, ducked her head under and put my hand on her breast, I was not prepared for that at all. All these explosions went off in my brain, and I was always under the impression that the only time that an older man would engage with a younger woman was if he was preying upon her, that he was pursuing her. I earnestly believe that it was completely unnatural for a young developing person to develop feelings and attachments to somebody in their 30s. It never occurred to me that her sexual emotional attention would be directed at me. I was caught off guard by this. I didn't know it. Leading up to that moment, looking back, I can see that she had been coming at me for a while. I didn't realize what it was. I never put it together because of my own repression, right? I'm going to talk about repression, but I was going forward with repressed assumptions about sexuality among 12-year-old girls. We were comfortable with each other. I'd been living under the same roof with her for a couple of years, and we were scrappy and wrestly, and no problems, just very comfortable with each other. Looking back, she was doing things that did not register with me as, sexual energy. I was cooking dinner. I was doing something. I was in the kitchen, standing at the counter, and we lived in this old craftsman house with big shiny wood floors, and she was scooting around on the floor. She did this thing where she was laying on her back in a fuzzy sweatshirt and using her feet to kind of push herself around the floor, and she scooted herself right in between my legs, as I was standing facing the counter. So, she was looking kind of up, kind of in between my legs. I was wearing baggy cargo shorts, and she reached right up the leg of my shorts and touched my junk. And I just went, whoa, what are you doing? I mean, we sat down and had a big conversation and about boundaries and about what's appropriate. That was like, what are you doing? But again, it didn't quite register with me what she was doing. I thought she was just wrestling or being scrappy because, again, that was very normal for us to. I mean, like I said, she would just try to take me out whenever she could. So she also did come home from school one day. They had done the sex ed curriculum at school, so she was asking questions. She and her mom and I kind of sat there, and I wasn't really engaged in that conversation too much. I mean, that's kind of between women, right? A mother and a daughter to kind of figure that stuff out. But I was there. I was present for some of those conversations, and again, I told her what I had told Zach. If there's anything you want to know, I'll always give you an honest answer. I wasn't prepared for the questions that she was going to ask. She started asking a lot of questions. It started out with her mom in the room, just asking honest questions, and then she would come to my room and ask questions. I remember her asking questions like, "What's a blowjob?" And I wasn't prepared for that kind of questioning. With Zach, it had been different. It was just a different deal. But she was like assertive and asking these questions. So I just kind of had to backpedal a little bit and be like, well, yeah, I'm going to give you an honest answer. But, geez, I wasn't prepared for that. So this happened gradually over the course of a long span of time. She just asked questions. She would bump into my room, and when I was in there, working, or in the shop when I was working or whatever, I had a shop set up at the house there, and it was common for her to come home from school. Her mom was at work or school, and I would be there at the house in the shop, building furniture and stuff. And so she would come into the shop, and I'd help her with her homework, and that's where she kept asking questions. She kept asking questions, and it escalated. I remember a time I was in the shower one time, and I'm washing the soap out of my hair and rinsing off, and I open my eyes and I see the shower curtain fall back into place, and I was, whoa, what? And I peeked out there, and she had snuck into the bathroom and was peeking around the curtain, staring at me naked. Again, we had a big old conversation, and I started locking the door. Not too much later, we were getting ready to go somewhere. I don't remember where we were going, but I ran over to my room to change clothes real quick before we left, and she waited to try to time it just right so that she popped my door open right when I was bare ass naked in the midst of changing. I told the girl no 100 times. I drew boundaries, and I tried to control the situation, but I just wasn't prepared. I wasn't prepared. That day where she dipped her head under my arm and put my hand on her breast is the moment in which some sort of switch kind of got flipped in me. There was kind of an explosion all at the same time. I was oblivious to the fact that she was coming at me up until that moment. And when that clicked for me, it was like everything, in my brain, everything that my culture told me over here was exploding because I didn't think that it was possible for her to be attracted to me. So I was totally confused by this. So there was all kinds of mental confusion going on. And at the same time, my biology kind of took hold to a certain extent. My repressed biology took hold over my body at that moment. So there was some sexual tension that developed inside of me in an instant. And so there was just this big explosion of chaos inside of me. My brain went to, well, I remember being 12 years old. I remember what it was like. I vividly remember what it was like. And when I was 12 years old, you could have, if you told me that I could experience sexuality with a 25 or 30-year-old woman as a 12-year-old, but only if I let you chop off my little toe with a rusty saw. I wanted sexuality so bad when I was 12 years old that I wouldn't have hesitated for a second. Absolutely, I would have. And I remember that vividly. Being in my teenage years was horrible because my body wanted sexuality, was my biology. My natural biology was just exploding out of my body and needing an outlet. The church culture that I was in told me that, oh, you're bad, you're wrong, that's evil, you're going to hell. So I got all twisted up and stuffed a lot of that. And, they told me that masturbation is a sin and only sinners do that. And I didn't know at the time that there is no such thing as a 12-year-old boy who doesn't masturbate. I didn't know that. They told me there was something wrong with me, and I believed them. So I tried to stop it, and it just screwed me up. I know now, looking back, that there's nothing wrong with biology. Reproductive biology is absolutely perfect. Reproductive biology is how humanity got to this place. I know that there's a lot of conflict and difficulty and uncertainty, around sexuality and reproduction, but the solution that morality comes up with, this abstinence solution, pretend that it isn't real and doesn't exist, that just stuffs it and represses it, and it's not the right answer. This conclusion that I've come to now has taken me, it's been over 10 years since I was arrested and went to prison and all that, but so it has taken a very long time for me to figure out what happened. And one of the things that helped me to understand what happened between she and I was reading Margaret Mead's book called Coming of Age in Samoa. I understand now that there's nothing wrong with reproductive biology, that, when you're 12 years old, biology is doing what biology is supposed to do and what it's always done. But there is something very, very wrong with our religious cultural ideology around sexuality. That's abundantly clear when you look out at our culture. I mean, we are all twisted up around sexuality. And the place that this ideology comes from, Christianity, specifically the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church gave the ideas of sexual morality to humanity. That's where it came from. And if you look at how twisted up the Catholic Church is over sex and how dark and ugly and predatory they are towards children, I mean, those guys are actually preying upon children, and it's because of repression. I'm going to tell you a story in order to help illustrate what repression is. I've read a lot of books. When I was in prison, I mean, that's all I did was read books and write. I read a story somewhere about a man in the original 13 colonies, back in the 1700s. He was walking on a footpath from his village to another village, and there was an attractive woman walking the opposite direction, and she was wearing one of those, big hoop skirts of the time, and very Victorian, very proper, no skin showing or anything like that, because that's all evil, dirty. This woman trips and falls. In the falling down, her leg kind of kicks up and exposes a little bit of skin on her ankle. Well, this guy sees this, and he helps her up and gets her on her way. But as he's walking, he can't stop thinking about her ankle flesh, right? The skin on her ankle. And he's so wound up inside sexually, so tense inside. The biological pressure is so intense inside of him that all it takes is a glimpse of her leg for him. And he couldn't stop thinking about her. And so 3 days later, he thought, you know what? The only proper thing to do, the only rightly Christian thing to do is to go find that woman and ask her to marry him. And that's what repression looks like. When you're all twisted up, it gets really screwy. We're not as repressed today as the Victorians, but we are definitely an emotionally repressed society. And it starts at puberty age. My culture around me told me that there is something wrong with the way that you're feeling. You shouldn't be feeling that. God made a mistake. And the way to fix that is whatever you're feeling inside of it, stuff it. Don't pay attention to it and ignore it and just try to muscle your way through until you can get to marriage. I've also come to understand that relationship is a skill set. Love is a verb. That means that it's an action. It's something that you have to do. If it's an action, it's something you have to learn how to do. We are not born with relationship skills. Just like as a toddler, we're born, we don't know how to walk. During our development, we have to learn how to walk. And the process for learning anything is trial and error. That's how we learn. So we learn how to walk by standing up and falling over and getting up again and trying it again and learning what doesn't work. And we get better at it every time we do it. Religious ideology tells us the best way to prepare for a life of relationship is to ignore everything that has to do with relationship. It's the analogy I use here. It's kind of like you want your kid to grow up to be a concert pianist, to play with the best of the best. But your approach is you're not going to allow them to ever see a piano or ever touch a piano until they turn 18 years old. But when they turn 18, you expect them to be a professional. That's absolutely ridiculous. It just doesn't work that way. The 12-year-old inside of me is still very much alive. I am angry about what my culture did to me. I was traumatized. I was abused. I was sexually and emotionally abused severely, but not in the sense that you think. Somebody didn't come and touch me. Instead, I was told lies, and I was made to feel guilt and shame about my biological truth, my biological nature. The people around me repressed my feelings, my emotional system, and my sexual biological systems, and damaged me. And I am angry about that. I'm here doing this because you did not have the right to suppress and repress my emotions and my sexual biology. You didn't have the right to do that. I couldn't stand up and defend myself as a 12-year-old, so the best I can do is defend myself now, all these years later. I am not suggesting that older people, older men, should be given the freedom to go have their way with, whatever young girls they want. I am not a pedophile. If you read the book Coming of Age in Samoa by Margaret Mead, this is about cultural anthropology, an understanding that different cultures that have approached adolescence and development differently get different results. We are a twisted up, angry, hostile, we are an emotionally sick society. We are an emotionally toxic culture. And the reason that we are an emotionally toxic culture is because we are all repressed. Every single one of us in this culture was a victim of the abuse of repression. And now, as adults, we're all emotionally and biologically unhealthy and twisted up. If you go to the Webster Dictionary and look up the word rape, the word rape specifically means taking something from somebody that is not willingly offered. That's it. That's rape. That word, we apply that word pretty much specifically to sexuality, but you can apply it to anything. Capitalism is a rapist. It takes. It takes. What Margaret Mead saw in Samoa when she was there in the 1920s was there was no sexual ideology, and they were a truly liberated people, and they were a much happier and much healthier society, emotionally and sexually. America was really struggling with teenage rebellion, right? They were going through the 60s, the hippie movement. The hippies were rebelling against the nuclear family. They wanted free love and communes. So there was a big cultural conversation over teenage angst and teenage rebellion. And Margaret Mead, through her studies in Samoa, saw that in Samoa there was no teenage angst, there was no teenage rebellion, there was no emotional turmoil in the teenagers of the Samoan society. They were very different. That culture was very different and didn't have the same problems that American Christian culture was having. When a girl or a boy came of age, when they start feeling the desire, the culture around them helped foster that. You have the freedom. It's your body. You have the freedom to do with your body what your biology is driving you to do. All human beings, regardless of age, have a fundamental right to express their biology and a fundamental right to choose their own partner, the person that they want to express their biology with. And if a young person is choosing someone of their own age, so be it. But if a young person is choosing somebody of an older age, they have the right to do that. And in that case, the older person is not taking something from the younger person that they're not pursuing on their own. When young women in Samoa engaged sexually with older men in the Samoan culture, there was not harm done as a matter of scientific cause and effect. We operate under the presumption that as a matter of scientific cause and effect, anytime that somebody over the age of 18 engages with somebody under the age of 18, that an injury has occurred, even if it's a 17-year-old and a 19-year-old. Our culture tells us that an injury has happened. And the science of cause and effect is that's just simply not the truth. It's not the case. So I did go to prison for 3.5 years. I confessed to this thing. It did escalate a little bit more than just, me having my hand on her breast. There was another time we were watching a movie down in the basement. It was dark and it had gotten to be kind of late. It was a Friday night or a Saturday night or something. And we were sitting on the couch. She was sitting next to me, and I was kind of dozing off. I wasn't totally awake, and she reached over and she grabbed my hand, and she put my hand on her vagina, and I didn't take it away right away. I made her feel good. I never penetrated her. The cops were so into the details, man. They just wanted the juicy details. They wanted to know how many times it happened and what happened, and I was dumbfounded. I confessed because I realized that culture had told me that I screwed up, that I messed this up, and I honestly I felt horrible. I did not intend for this to happen. I did not want this to happen. This was not what I was trying to do here. And I was just floored that this happened. I couldn't believe it. And so the reason that I chose to tell the truth and the reason that I confessed was because I was trying to take responsibility. What I really wanted to do was to try and fix what I had screwed up. My culture told me I had screwed up. I had damaged her. I had hurt her. And I wanted to do what I could to fix that. So I wanted to give my culture the opportunity to do its justice and fix the damage that I had caused. If she needs to be in therapy, then I wanted her to be in therapy. And if the therapist needed to know exactly what happened in order to help her heal, then I was going to give them every bit of information that I could to help her, heal from the trauma that I caused, right? So I confessed with that intention. And when I'm telling the cops the details, I'm, thinking that the cops they were not interested in the information that I was offering for the same reasons that I was offering it. The justice system has no interest in healing or fixing or correcting. It just punishes people. It just smashes people out. And so it really struck me as like, who are you people? Like, they just wanted to know the juicy details. They specifically wanted to know how many times this happened. And I was like, I wasn't keeping track. I wasn't putting notches on my belt. If you go back in time to like, as long as I've known this girl, I mean, we've always been scrappy and wrestly and grab ass, right? I can't tell you how many times there was physical contact between she and I have no idea. I told the detective more than once, less than 1,000,000 times. And he goes, you really want me to write down 1,000,000 times on here? I don't care. I wasn't keeping track. I don't understand why you are so focused on all of this. Well, because he's trying to rack up as many charges as he possibly can, because he's in the business of fucking people up. So he was just trying to draw as much information out of me as he could use to put me away for as long of a time as they possibly could, to harm me as much as they possibly could. And none of that registered to me at the time. In retrospect, I understand that my culture punished me because I didn't walk the line. As an adult, you're supposed to know that your job is to suppress the biology of young people. And if you don't suppress the biology of young people, we're going to hurt you. My culture wanted me to force her biology into repression. And something inside of me, I failed to repress her biology, and I was persecuted and punished for it. This young woman's name was Maria. That's her legal name. And she doesn't go by that name. She goes by her middle name. But I was persecuted and imprisoned for 3.5 years, permanently labeled as a sex offender for my contact with a young virgin named Maria, the Virgin Mary.